Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar on perfecting your requirements with no-code functional prototyping here at Codeless One. Before we begin, just a few reminders. At the end of this webinar, we will send a recording of it to your inbox by the end of the week, and it will also be available on our platform here in the next couple of days. We've also allocated some time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but also feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A window at any time. Please do not ask any questions in the chat as we're not actually monitoring it. We will address these as best we can by the end of the webinar, but if we do run out of time and we couldn't get to your question or any additional questions might have come up after the event, you can always send us an email at info@codeless1.com. We'll get you your answers as soon as possible. There will also be a couple of polls and a survey at the end of the webinar that will appear. Please take a few moments to provide your valuable feedback so we can continue to improve on these webinars to suit your needs. Today's speaker is going to be Mr. Asif Sharif. He is the founder and CEO of Model Requirements and Codeless One, and I'm actually quite pleased to introduce him right now. So, Asif, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Hey, folks. Good morning, good afternoon. So Codeless One came out of Model Requirements. So Model Requirements is a requirements management organization. We provide a software for Azure DevOps. And one of the issues we keep hearing from people is how do we make sure our projects can be delivered on time? And to answer that question, we developed Codeless One. Now we've been working with Microsoft on various AI projects. And Codeless One as well has been building on artificial intelligence and automation to help with rapid prototyping of functional applications. So what does that mean? Now, in order to understand the value of Codeless One, we need to understand what are the problems we face from a requirements perspective or from a project perspective. And some of the problems we tend to hear are there are lots of development roadblocks, whether they're bugs or technical issues, getting good test coverage. Requirements are changing because people understand what they need over time. And that happens because of lack of stakeholder alignment. We don't communicate with each other as effectively. And of course, communication is tough. So requirements inevitably becomes ambiguous, especially for more complex systems, and so on and so forth. So there's many reasons why projects get into trouble. And requirements is at the center of that conversation. So let me talk about what is the problem we often run into with application development. So application development, you'll find, is like solving a jigsaw puzzle, putting it together. Lots of pieces, they must come together properly, a lot of stakeholders. And so what we end up doing is we write requirements. You may write user stories or whatever. You review those requirements. You'll create wireframes. You'll fine-tune the wireframes based on feedback. You'll design it, you'll code it, you'll test it, and you will iterate through the process in building the solution. So every 2-3 months, you'll get something you can perhaps deploy and use, but it's a very iterative process. In every step of the way, we are getting more clarity. Okay. And of course, if you miscommunicate it, we'll catch it and then fix it in the next one. If you miscommunicate it again, and eventually we will see if we actually can deliver the value we have promised through the project. Okay, so that's how projects work today. Now, in real terms, so consider we're building an event planning system. Okay, so what we would end up doing is we'll define what features. Of course, you'll start with the goals and the objectives and perhaps KPIs, and then, but when you get into your requirements, you'll define the features of the system. And this system that I'm talking about has 16 major features. And every feature, you may build out process maps and so on to get clarity. And then for every feature, you'll create a series of user stories or PBIs or whatever structure or approach you like. And then you'll create the details of your user stories, as in description, acceptance criteria, and so on. So already you've started to create a lot of content. And somebody's going to go through and start to envision what they want. You can imagine that is a non-trivial problem. That's a hard problem, right? That's why I referred to the jigsaw puzzle up front, lots of pieces. Now, what do we do next to solve this problem? So typically what we do is we create mockups. So I might create a mockup that says, you know what, that's my logo. I want a banner like this. I want a menu like this. I want dashboarding that can be configured. I want reporting in my system. So here's the mockup I'll do of how reporting should work. I want to manage my events through a table format and color formatting and whatever else. And when I drill down into an event, I want this to look like this, right? So what you're doing is you're specifying what the look and feel should be, what the experience should be. So that if you put the textual requirements with the mockups, it provides another level of clarity in the process, right? And so likewise, you further drill down and say, okay, you know what, an event may have tasks. We need to manage those tasks within it. And I need history in there, so we go to mock up the history. We need discussion against these events. We need calendaring, and so on and so forth. Okay, we need to be able to create views or queries. We need Kanban boards for our tasks. We need charts, graph support. We need workflows. So if I submit a request for an approval, I need a UI, and so this is my mock-up for it. And then I can manage the workflow. I can approve things, reject things, and so on and so forth. Okay. So the whole point being, we create a bunch of wireframes to support the textual and the diagrams of the process maps we've created to try to put different pieces of the puzzle together to make it connect. Okay. And we need administration. We need user management. We need lots of things, notification, and so on and so forth. Right? So we wireframe everything. Now, the point I want you to make is this. When you have the vision, the clarity is very little. You understand very little of what needs to be done. But as you go down the steps of building your solution, you write requirements, you got more clarity. You do wireframe, you got even more clarity. You design it, you're starting to have more clarity. Once you deploy it and you start using it, now you have complete clarity on what the software will deliver. However, change now is very expensive. So what I'm going to suggest to you is this idea of use, move this use up here. Don't use it after 2 months and only part of it, because to complete the whole cycle will take you multiple 2-month cycles for this kind of project. So in 6 months, 9 months, you might be done, where people will now be able to use the whole system. But now you've already invested many person years of effort, and a lot of time has passed by before you can actually use it. So can we, what if you could use it before you actually build it? Okay, so that's the real thing. Can we use it before we build it? And if we can, then we can short circuit a lot of the problems we face in our software projects. So how do we use it before we build it? So what you need is a rich, functionally rich prototype where people can experience the user interface and the interaction there. The workflows can be validated. The business logic can be validated. You can have a supporting data model in the back end that you're working with because of this prototype, and you have reporting and dashboarding in place. So really, from a user's perspective, this looks as very close to the final product. And now you can short circuit any mistakes that might be done. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can do this efficiently. And one of the key approaches we use in solving this problem is to use artificial intelligence and automation. Okay. You'll find that patterns in software development are everywhere. Okay. And of course, as you know, with LLMs, as in ChatGPT or other AI systems, it is all based on patterns. It deals with complex patterns, perhaps, but it is based on patterns. And the question is, how do you utilize those patterns effectively in order for us to do things faster? Okay, and you'll see that in action right now. Okay, so using AI and automation will reduce the workload. So the amount of time you take to build something will increase your efficiency and improve accuracy. Okay, so let's take a look at an application. Let's build one. Okay, so with Codeless 1, you have two options. One option is you can go to the library, find an application perhaps that close to what you're building, and fine tune it. Right. So you can go to the library, and there's a bunch of applications you can sort of use as a starting point for your prototype. You can search for them here or just browse through categories. Okay. However, for this webinar, I'm actually going to start from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say I want a new app. Okay. So I want to build a new app. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say event management for corp. Okay, I'm going to just give it some name. Okay, I can give it a description, but I won't. And I'm just going to give it a name, and then I'm going to say next. Now, what happens now is Codeless 1 has the intelligence to determine, based on your name of the application, what types of information might you want to manage in it. So you need to manage events. Okay, where's the location, right? What type of event is it? I need to manage speakers, attendees, sponsors, registration. I need to manage the agenda, perhaps budgeting, marketing, whatever else, and I can request even more. And some of them, the system automatically determines and checks them on. It says, I think this should be there, but you can choose the others if you like. Okay. And you can at any time go say, hey, give me more if you want. It'll tell you that event type should be a drop down, and here's some examples of it. You can say, you know what, let me reorder them, add more, remove some. You can edit your model here. Now, you can also develop these models on your own. There is a sort of, you can just go create app and then create your own models by yourself. But using Alice AI will help you determine what information the application should manage. So Codeless 1 is a domain-based no-code system. So you define your domain model, and from the domain model, everything will come out and you will configure it. Okay. So now we have got our entities. We'll just leave these alone for now. We'll go next. Now the next thing is Codeless 1 will recommend what are the relationships between an event and a venue. An event can only be in one venue. So that seems correct. An event can have many attendees. Correct again. Event should have many speakers. That's right. An event could have many agendas. Maybe for different sessions or different days. So we'll say fine. Event can have many registrations for sure. Event can have many sponsors. Event can have many feedback. I'll love all of those, right? So we'll accept it. If we didn't like it, we could have clicked on it and unselected it, but we'll keep it selected. That's it. So now what we have done is we have defined a domain model. We have defined the entities, the attributes, the relationships between them, and we'll say to Codeless One now, go do your magic. Okay. Create for me an application that is rich, that is beautiful to look at, that is functional, that I can run reports and dashboarding and all kinds of stuff on, and do it in the next 20 seconds. Okay. So you got all of these little bots running in the background, writing all the code for you, putting them together, and shortly it will present to you the application. Oh yeah, one other thing. It's also publishing the application and make it available as a web app. So it's done all of that in the last 30, 40 some seconds. Okay. So this is the application it created. Okay. But you know what, right now, there's not much data in there, so it's hard to tell. So let's just add some sample data to it. Okay. So I'm just going to go tell it, add some sample data to it. And once we have some sample data, now it's much easier to see what the prototype is looking like, right? So here's my entities. I can create new entities here. So I can give it a name, a date of the event, location, blah, blah, blah. For any event, I can drill down into it, look at all the details of it, and then look at the speakers that are assigned to it, and look at the attendees we have, or whatever the case may be. Okay, and look at the history of what's happened. So of course we haven't done anything but to create. So you see the initial point there. Okay. We can likewise manage all of this information in here, but you see one of the things, so you might now be considering, okay, now this looks like a very interesting starting point. If you had to even create a mock-up of something like this, would have taken way longer, right? It would have taken days, if not weeks, to create all the mock-ups for these things. To create functionally rich application is hard to do. And now if I want to edit it, and so I could say Codeless One, funds management event, and so now I've changed it, and this is a real thing, and so on, right? So it's a fully functional app. Okay. Now, if you want to make edits, so one of the key cool things about Codeless One is, as you are sort of, this is just a starting point, right? The system didn't know all the things you want to do, all the rules you want. So this is just a starting point, but it is a brilliant starting point, because already is giving you probably 50+% of the functionality, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on. What am I turning on? App edit. So you see in Codeless One, if I wanted the menu, instead of being at the top level, I want the menu to be on the left, like Outlook. And I did not want to enable these, or I wanted my menus to, for example, I don't want to show this in the main menu. The feedback will be under the event as well. So remove that. Agenda is also for that. I'll get rid of this. I'll get rid of whatever I want. So, and I can reorder it. And when I'm done, I'll simply go and publish it. Okay. And so what I'm doing, I'm just telling it, update the application for me. Okay. And voila, you see the menu on the left, and the menus have reduced now because I eliminated a few. And now we're off to the races. If I want to change this part, then I can also click on edit, and I can update that particular part simply by saying, you know what, I don't want the description in there. So if I don't want description in that area, I'll just disable it, remove it, and maybe I'll add event type, and I'll just have name, event type, date, location. Perfect. And I'll just make an update. So you see here, what we are doing is, as we are going to walk the stakeholders through the application, we can make edits for them right there and then, right? Because otherwise what you have to do is you have to go to some guy who's going to do the mock-up, wireframe it, make it look right, or give it to the developers who has to now go and make changes, and a week later you'll get these changes if you're lucky, right? That's too slow a process. Here's the point. If you look at this application, you can actually add users to this application, and they can start using it. Your end users, your stakeholders, your sponsors, they can start to use it and give you feedback. Okay, so as opposed to walking them through rims of paper, i.e., 100 user stories, which is ridiculous, because who can read and comprehend and put all the pieces together? Very difficult. And then you give them diagrams, you give them wireframes. That doesn't really provide clarity. I think it just provides over information. But if you could let them use it before you say the requirements are done, now that is magic. All right, so what I'm going to do is I built an application like this and configured a few things. So let me show you what that looks like. So it's the same application essentially, but I have more data in there, and I've configured a few things. So in this application, now you can go to your stakeholders and say, okay, you want a dashboard. This is what the dashboard is going to look like. Okay, you'll be able to add other widgets to it. Okay, so you could add a progress. You could add a progress bar there. Okay. I can put a progress bar here, and then I can configure it. Right. And okay, like so, right? And people can then see, yeah, you know what? I know how to manage my my dashboard, and the dashboard is active and working. I can put lists on my dashboard, and yes, if I click on it, I want to go into my records. Right? So now people are not imagining what the dashboard might look like. They are actually experiencing that dashboard. You didn't have to build it. You just gave Codeless 1 the heavy lifting to get the job done. Okay, so we got the dashboards, and yeah, of course, yeah, for sure, we need multiple dashboards. So I can create multiple dashboards, switch between them, so people can really experience. Your management can have a particular view, your field folks can have a different view, IT can have a different view, or whatever the case may be. So you engage everybody within the dashboard construct, you get the feedback, you fine tune it, and you can say, you know what, the requirements for dashboard is right on. You can go to the reporting area, and you can say, you know what, I need this reporting stuff here. Okay, so this is my capacity for the event. So basically, this is how you would configure the reports. You can define what columns I need, what order they need to be in, what filter I need to apply, and you'll give this to people, and they'll use it, and they'll tell you if you got it right or if you got it wrong, and if you need other things like sum or whatever, you can sort of. So it's a rich dashboarding experience, reporting experience, right? And yeah, And of course, you can create many many reports, right? So you can create new reports, and people can really understand. You see, one of the problems you'll find when you do applications, and as the founder of two companies, I know this very well. Often you go build the system, and 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, when you're done with it, you realize that it was misguided to do the project in the first place because nobody ended up using it, or the usage was minimal, right? But you went ahead and built it anyways. So now you're $250,000, $1 million under, and now you have realized that you've missed the mark, right? And that's not good for any organization that wants to progress, right? So you got to be efficient, and the way to be efficient is to get clarity and get it as fast as you can, right? Now, then what you might do is you might say, okay, well, how about workflows? So when I get a new event, I need to approve it. Somebody has to approve it. So I need to define the workflow for event management. And I'll show you that later, but here's the UI. So this is an event. Mao submitted it. I can approve it or I can reject it. Okay, so let's go and approve this. So, yep, I'm good with that. This guy, maybe not. Okay. And you can even have, the workflow can have conditional branching. It can have workflow and sub workflows being chained, all kinds of stuff. Okay. So you could come back to a workflow. You could have 6 different workflows that you as a user would need to do something with. So this is a very personal view. Then you can execute on the approvals, on the activities, and manage it. So of course, lots of applications have workflows built into them, and you need that. So then you go into events, and you say, fine, you know what, guys, since you're building an event management system, of course, you need to be able to navigate through events. You need to see whether something is on progress or canceled or on hold or completed or whatever or approved. And there are color codes associated to that, and all of that can be configured in the system. And then you have the days remaining for the event, and this is already 1 day past, but this guy is 4 days to go. And even is the registration still open, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, of course, you might say we already have data we need to import, or we want to export this data. So you can just export data from here, or you can also import data from the app admin area, so that when people are doing looking at this as a proof of concept or a prototype, they can put in their own data and use it, right? So it's not gibberish. It's particular to your needs, right? So hopefully you can start to see that when people can see and experience the application, right? By the way, this entire application that I'm showing you, which is obviously very similar to what was built automatically, probably had about an hour or 2 hours of fine tuning done. That was it. Now, of course, this was done without a lot of stakeholders involved in it. So it was probably more efficient. When you have a lot of stakeholders, you get a lot of feedback. So maybe it won't take an hour to fine tune this. Maybe it'll take 10 hours. But 10 hours to get a rich application like this, which would otherwise take a dev team of probably at least a handful of developers, 6 to 9 months to build. And if we can get the requirements validated up front, does it change the game? And I would submit it changes the game completely, right? Because you see, the one other thing you might want to consider is that when you are doing your requirements, people really don't know what they're going to get. They have some vision in their heads, You hear what they're saying, you get a vision in your head, and the developer will get some vision. Of course, our mental models are completely isolated. So we write requirements and mockups and stuff to communicate that. The best way to communicate is to have a good UI that's functional, can save the data, can search the data, can retrieve the data. So if I go and search here, for example, I search for a car, then it tell me I actually found car under venue, and now I can go drill down into it and get to all the details. So this ability to search is there because there's actually real data involved in it. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind a functional prototype. It's not a pretty picture only. It is a real application with different ways of visualizing information, working through workflows. But you might then say, what if I want to, oh yeah, before I show you that, let me show you one other thing. So one of the other things you might do is to create lists. So you might say, show me my tasks that are of high priority. Okay, so these are the high priority tasks. In fact, I'll go to the table view. So there's a couple of tasks that are of high priority. Okay, so you can create lists, right? Because people want to create queries. If you come from an Azure DevOps kind of background, they call it queries, and Jira-like system, they call it lists. But you can create those in the system, and people can now say, okay, you know what? If I'm going to do a proof of concept, I can actually now do it legitimately, okay? Because the whole system is secure. Now, when I talk about can people use it for a proof of concept, okay? Can it be more than prototype? Sure, it can be. Why? Because security is central to Codeless One, right? So what did we do? So a few things. One, if I go to the admin area under application settings, I want to show you a few things. One is under the app model is actually all your entities, your objects, right? So we said there's an event object, and the event object has many properties. Of course, in this case, our AI engine recommended these and created these, but you can always create your own, right? You can create your own properties, or you can again ask LSAI to make other recommendations for other properties. So it's like, hey, I don't see an ID, right? So I guess I picked up all the appropriate ones there. But you can create these attributes, but this is where you can do it manually. Okay, you can also define your color coding here, and various other rules can be defined, like state transition rules. So you could say only certain people can transition from state A to a state B. And so if there is a bug, only a tester can close the bug, would be one example. If it is an invoice that is getting paid, so only finance can mark it paid, right? So you want to define those rules. Those rules are defined here. And then you've got the object relationships. So we reviewed that initially, and then you can come here, add others, or update these. You have roles and rights. So you want to be able to configure which types of users can do what. Okay. So you can see when you give this as a prototype to people, you can mimic the end product very closely. Now, of course, it depends on what the end product is. If it's a business app, then yes. If it is a firmware, then of course, this is a UI-based application. So there are use cases for this, and many use cases for that, right? And then you can create portals. So the idea of portals is very interesting, because you see in here, you'll see I have two portals. These two portals are using the same database, but exposing overlapping parts of the application. So there are certain parts the vendor portal management will only have access to. There are other parts this guy would have access to. There are other things that both can have access to. And you can control who is member of which portal, so they can work with that, right? So imagine a system that, imagine two systems, and they both have customer information in them, right? So you end up with redundancy. But now you can have one system with two portals, but they share the customer record, and based on the roles, you can control who can see what data. Okay. So you can control who can see what data, and thereby being a lot more, you can have centralized definition with different access roles. Okay. You can even define data access at the row level. So you could say somebody in, my salesperson in Canada can have access to records in Canada. My salesperson in the US can have access to records in the US, and so on and so forth. So you can control row level access control. Okay. Now, and of course, everything is done over HTTPS, and so everything is secure, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the whole experience here that we are going after is that we want people to have as close an experience to the final product you're trying to build as possible, and as quickly as possible. Okay? Because if you can communicate effectively, so what happens from a business user's perspective, they understand what they're asking for, and they can change their mind proactively, as opposed to agree to it and only realize later on they agreed to the wrong thing. We have a solid foundation to understand business rules and workflow. And the expectation of the final product is clear. Expectations is the biggest problem, right? And these are the benefits for business users from a product owner perspective or business analyst perspective. What you will find is that we have better understanding of business requirements, right? Obviously, right? We have improved our communication with all stakeholders in the team, and it's easier to validate the business process, right? Because validation is critical. Otherwise, we'll build the wrong thing, right? Now, she's happy because she can see the Codeless app the next day, right? She doesn't have to wait for 6 months to see what the functionality is going to be. All right. The developers, well, now developers know exactly what they have to build. One of the biggest problems developers face, and I know this because when I was young and smart, I used to be one, is understanding exactly what is needed, and you're working with a level of ambiguity all the time. And until I show it to you, I'm not certain you're getting the right thing. And that just creates a negative energy. Now, if I know exactly what I have to build, that's simple. In fact, they can even take a lot of the content from a Codeless One app and reuse it. It, of course, makes my development a straight line, and because requirements are not changing and I have clarity, right? And so I'm going to build a system that has fewer bugs. If you continue to ask your developers to refactor the solution they're building, then they end up creating a lot of bugs. And of course, finishing the project in 9 months might be one thing, but then getting it to be stable and reliable might be another several months, right? So it can be a long project before people really get the solution to use. Now you can build a Codeless One app, you can launch it, they can do a proof of concept while development is happening, and then you can just migrate the data over if you like. Of course, from an executive or project sponsor perspective, they certainly want to see that we do more with less. They want the risk of project failure reduced, but more importantly, I would submit to you that they don't want to invest in projects that are not going to be used. By creating a functional prototype and maybe doing a proof of concept, you can make sure it's a solution that's going to be used and it's viable, right? So that'll be great, right? To not lead into projects that fail or never get used. And of course, we want faster time to market. That's how we remain competitive and provide good service to our users, our clients.
Now, can you show the actual code generated in the background?
So this system is, so no, I can't. And the reason for that is the way this system works is it's a 3D meta model architecture, and that means the system is driven through meta models, and although there are codes we produce, the content in there is injected dynamically. So it's really a hybrid model, and that's how we can produce, as in this case, probably 100 different pages to the application within a minute. Is we use this meta model template that's configurable, and we bring it all together. So it's really not a conventional JavaScript or JS node architecture in a conventional design. This is much more dynamic in design. But of course, when you have the web page, you can always reuse elements of it in your application simply by using the HTML that we are producing.
Okay, perfect. That kind of touches on the next question as well. Is this a hybrid development? And does one-time development for all devices and OSS?
Correct. So this is a browser-based app that is responsive. So you can use this on mobile tablets, mobile tablet, desktop, under any OS. So it is responsive and browser-based, and thus can be used on any of those.
Okay, and how easy is it to maintain the code?
Well, the brilliance of Codeless 1 is you don't have to. There is no maintenance required. You basically, it's a bunch of configuration you do through the various tools we provide. As I mentioned, you can turn on the inline editing component of it, or you can go to the admin area and do your editing. So it's all configuration based. So the whole approach we have taken is no code. We want to encourage people who are not geeky to be able to use the system. But of course, if you're a geek like me, or at least when I used to be one, you can of course use it as well. But the whole premise of this thing is it is codeless. Now, that doesn't mean it is not extensible. You can extend it. For example, you can use event hooks and call REST APIs, and you can use Zapier to integrate. Or we also have a advanced workflow modeling, as in BPMN like tool that not only does internal business process modeling, but also does integrations with 50 some odd systems. So you can extend it using those tools, but the whole idea behind this is it is no code. In fact, we didn't even have to drag and drop things, right? So I want to just point out one quick thing here. So let's say that I do this and I do edit, right? So I want to edit this form. And in this form, you have the ability in the form builder to actually drag and drop and organize your forms exactly how you want it. Okay. However, you should note, initially I did not have to do anything. when we built an app together. The system made a best guess, but later on you can fine tune it if you like.
Awesome. And I got a couple more questions here for you, Asif, but how do we create a prototype of integrations?
So there is an integration manager we have, and using the integration manager, you can define your business flow, and we should actually do a separate webinar on that to show how the integration and business process modeling actually works. So we will make note of that, and certainly you can reach out to us, or we can reach out to you and give you a more personalized view on how to do that. But we will try to do another webinar, because that obviously is a big topic to talk about.
Okay, I'll put a note aside for that one. Now, is it possible to do a multi-step approval workflow? And if so, how is that created?
Right. So workflows are created through the admin area. So you define your workflows, and workflows can trigger other subflows. Okay. So you can define workflow, you can say what triggers the workflow, and who is going to do the action on the workflow, and what are the actions they can do, and what are the state changes it will happen, and what are the subflows, the flow that will be triggered in turn when this action is taken on this flow. And then you can say whether you want comments, like, for example, if I submit a timesheet, I want to, and somebody rejects it, I want them to tell me why. So in that case, I'll make commentary yes for rejections. Okay, and then I can save the workflow, and then it'll be enforced. So you can actually chain workflows together.
Okay. And then do you know if we can deploy Codeless 1 into production, or how far is it from being production ready?
So people have different approaches. I believe that for a lot of the applications, this could be considered as production ready. You could actually be done with it, do a POC, and then say, you know what? For our use case, everything that Codeless 1 provides is what we need. Let's go live and start using it, because it has got the security, it's got the functionality, it's got things that otherwise would take months to build, an army of developers and testers and other resources. Now we can streamline the process, bring the business closer. On the other hand, you might find there functionality that Codeless 1 doesn't do. Okay, so if you're doing a system that needs certain specific feature sets that Codeless 1 doesn't provide, then you might say, you know, this got me to the 80% mark or 70% mark, and I've been able to validate most of it, but there are certain things it doesn't do. And obviously I need that. And therefore I'm going to use this only as a prototype and then build a solution on my own. So it's really up to you and the scenario you're working through.
Now, how easy is it to upgrade or modify the actual application?
Oh, it's easy, right? So you basically go wherever you are. And in fact, I was doing that when I was clicking on these orange circles to edit. I'm actually updating the real application. Now, you can have a sandbox where you're doing testing, and let's call it production, where people are using it. So you could have a prod and dev or prototyping stages where you can sort of stay between the two. But updating is straightforward and inherent to the tool. Simple.
Okay, and how do you change the code if there is a bug?
So what we do from our end is, obviously we do a ton of automated testing, and for Codeless One, um, so there are two types of code. The error could be in your design, and so of course then you can go update the design, because you run into it, you'll see, it doesn't show the right thing, let's fix the design. Alternatively, is Codeless One bug free? And if, of course, if there are issues we find, we fix it right away when we hear from our clients. But we spend an enormous amount of time and energies testing to make sure that Codeless One produces application that is bug free.
Now, can you integrate to Java or React.js applications easily?
So there are two ways of integration. One is using, so the integration would either be through using REST API or event hooks, or one of the our workflow integration tool, or Zapier or something like that. So that's sort of more of a process integration. But if you want parts of Codeless One to show up in your application, you can also do that, right? So you want people to submit bugs into your system, and you want to create a form like this one, but this form should show up on your web page. You can do that, okay? Or you want to have a step-by-step form, so that not everybody doesn't see 20 fields, but they see 5 and then next, and they get the rest of it. But you wanted to embed it in your application, you can do that. So there's various ways of doing integrations.
Can we do an integration through API?
Yes. As I said, you can integrate through REST APIs, through Zapier. Those would be the two primary API ways of integrating, unless you're using our workflow engine, but that's part of our tool, so it's not API based.
Okay, and I have a couple more questions, but how is this any different than using existing robot software?
Yeah, that's a very broad term. I mean, you can. There's lots of tools out there that build little toys. You can see this application that Codeless One has produced is looks and functions like an enterprise application with the richness of it. So yes, there are robot tools that can build a browse page or this little things. Codeless One application is an enterprise scale application with security and with a very, very rich set of experiences.
Now, is there a version control to this?
So there's two things we were doing. So one thing we just released, which is having multiple instances. So when you could have dev, test, prod kind of instances, and versioning is coming shortly, where you can version your models and then roll back or whatever, or branch it off into a new application and so on. So that's coming shortly.
Okay, amazing. And the last question I have, but what is the best way to learn about Codeless One? And I can kind of take this one on. Myself and my product team can definitely help you guys learn the best way to learn through Codeless One. So that was one last question that came in there. But have you done any performance benchmarking with other applications that are built in Java or React.js or C++?
So yes, we have done various types of load and stress tests on the application, and this scales really well. It is on an elastic architecture, so on the server side it auto scales, based on the load and stress given to the server. So architecturally, it's designed to scale and demand more resources from Azure. This is by default hosted on Azure, as we are strong partners with Microsoft on various fronts. So yes, we have, and we'd love to talk more about it with you.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's actually all the questions that we received today. But I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And again, if you do have any follow-up questions that were not answered today, please contact us directly at info@codeless1.com, and we will be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Asif one last time to send us on our way. So, Asif, the floor is yours.
All right. So, folks, thanks again for joining. I just want to mention a couple of things. One, if you have more questions for us, please let us know. If you are thinking of building an application with Codeless One as a prototype or a proof of concept or whatever you have, reach out to us. We'll work with you for free to build your first app, right? First app is on us. Reach out, we'll figure out the details. We'll see how best we can help you understand the value of using it before you build it. Now, folks, I must tell you a personal story. I started this project actually 20 years ago. And this tagline, use it before you build it, I came up with 20 years ago. And at that time, we had built compared to this, a rudimentary system, but people loved it, right? So a few years ago, we resurrected that idea, completely brand new, fresh, but we resurrected the idea of being able to build a functioning, a rich prototype with a click of a button. And that is what you see here. And then we made sure that this could be usable in proof of concepts or even in production. And that was the vision. I think we've achieved it to a great extent. If you have further feedback, please reach out. But it was lovely speaking to you all. Stay well and peace.